Welcome to the Video Immunology Lecture Series based on Janeway's Immunology 9th edition textbook. Today, we're going to give an introduction to the lecture series and how it's going to work, introduction to immunology in general, a broad overview of how the immune system works, and the different components that make up the immune system. Now, I'm just going to be giving you a broad overview. In all of the subsequent lectures, you'll learn more details about everything, how the immune system works. So, as I mentioned, we'll be using the Janeway Immunology 9th edition textbook, which you should all have. I encourage you to have the book with you when you watch these videos so you can actually look at the figures in the textbook, as they'll probably be easier to read than they are on the slides where the print might be a little bit small. The syllabus has 29 lectures. Each lecture is about 45 to 60 minutes long. Please view the lectures in order, as each lecture builds on the next, and we're assuming you have the prior knowledge for the next lecture. I would encourage you to read the assigned material prior to viewing each lecture, and keep in mind that the lecture order and the reading assignments is not the same as the chapter order in the book. The syllabus is on the next slide, but the print is small, so you will also get a separate file that has the syllabus in it so you can know what the reading assignments are. I hope you enjoy the lecture series and learning about immunology. So again, here's the syllabus if you need it, but you will have a separate file. So, what's the purpose of our immune system? And there's sort of two ways to think about this. There's why do we have an immune system and what it actually does. And sometimes those answers are different, and as you study immunology, you have to keep those two things in mind. So, we have an immune system to protect us from foreigners, you could call it. And that's sort of a little bit about why we have one. But the immune system needs to distinguish self from non-self in order to say what a foreigner is. So distinguishing self from self is more what the immune system does, but not why we have one. Kills pathogens? Maybe you could say it's both, why we have one and what it does. Generates memory responses once it's seen a pathogen, which can then prevent reinfection. That's sort of what it actually does, not really why we have one. Prevents disease, could be both. And overall, keeping us healthy is really why we have an immune system. So, how would you define success in an immune response? And there's a few different answers to this. You could say elimination of a pathogen. What about an asymptomatic infection where you're not sick? Could that be success? Protection from a subsequent infection, which is memory. So once you get an infection, you don't ever get it again. It's successful the second time around, but it isn't really successful the first time around because you get sick. And maybe your immune system can control a pathogen you have for your entire life. You may not even know you have it, but it never eliminates it. But is that a success? So with all of these, there's a mixture of success and failure. So there's not one answer to what's a successful immune response. Here's a picture that shows sort of how our body deals with a foreign invasion. And we start with, on the outer wall here, anatomical and physical barriers. Now actually they occur before your immune system actually kicks in. And they're a major line of defense. So you have low stomach pH. That acid can kill a lot of things that get into your stomach. Not everything, but most pathogens. You have movement in your lungs, so ciliary clearance. We breathe in a lot of things, and the movement in our lungs pushes those things back out so they don't make us sick. you've got some enzymes in your tears and saliva that can break down some proteins. That can also prevent an infection. And the biggest barrier we have is actually our skin, our intact skin, which covers our body, of course, and that keeps out many pathogens. Now, if your outer walls are breached, then your immune system comes into play. And first, it's the innate immune system that forms the next defense mechanism, and ultimately, it's your adaptive immunity that will kick in if the infection is prolonged and severe. So, for the barriers, you can think about them in three different ways. There's mechanical, which is actually the simple physical barrier like your skin. There's chemical, which is things like the low pH or the enzymes in your saliva. And there's a few microbiological things, including your normal flora. Now, I think you all probably know about the term microbiome. And that means that we have commensal organisms that sort of live with us. A lot of bacteria live in our digestive tract, they live on our skin, in our lungs. And those organisms also help to sort of crowd out potential pathogenic organisms. Now, the different branches of the immune system. You've got innate and adaptive. But what do those names actually mean? Innate, you can imagine, is sort of what you're born with, what you have to begin with. And adaptive is exactly what the name says. Your immune system is going to adapt to a pathogen it encounters. Both of these include many different cell types, which you'll learn about throughout the lecture series, and soluble molecules. And most soluble molecules evolved in the immune system are cytokines and chemokines. Cytokines tell cells what to do. Chemokines tell cells where to go. Your innate immunity, your natural immunity, it's not really pathogen species specific. It can tell the difference between categories of pathogens, but not different species within the same category. It's an early response. It's sort of a quick and dirty response. It, of course, has to distinguish self from non-self, and it can identify patterns of different pathogens. So bacteria have some similar patterns. Viruses have some similar patterns, and that's what the innate immune system is designed to recognize. It could also see damage caused by a pathogen, and in general, it also has to determine friend from foe, because not everything that's foreign is actually bad for you. Think about food. We eat food every day. It's all foreign. It's not part of us. But ideally, we don't want to make an immune response to it. So the innate immune response not only has to distinguish between self and non-self, it has to distinguish dangerous from not dangerous. So, the jobs of your innate immune system. Identify again those bad, those nefarious invaders. Kill some of those invading pathogens. But a really important part of the innate immune system is to actually alert the rest of the immune system that there's been a breach in a barrier and there's actually an invasion by a pathogen. So your innate immune system needs to be located along all those barrier sites. So you have a lot of innate cells in your skin, in your lungs, in your digestive tract, because those are the most likely places at barrier sites where a pathogen can first enter your body. In addition to alerting about infection, it can also signal that there's damage. And in fact, other than mammals, which all have adaptive immune systems, 99% of animals only have an innate immune response. So how about the adaptive immune system? What does it do? It's very good at killing pathogens, and it does it very, very specifically. It can distinguish between very closely related pathogens. And it's really, the main benefit of the adaptive immune system is to generate memory. So the first time you get an infection, you're going to get sick, but then hopefully you never get that infection again. For instance, if you get smallpox once and you survive, you will have memory and immunity to it, and you won't get sick again. And that's all based on the adaptive immune response. Now, again, ideally it prevents reinfection, but sometimes it can only prevent you from feeling sick even though you're still infected. And that would be the case with a disease like malaria. So if you want to compare innate and adaptive, first of all, you can see the innate response comes up early and fast and then quickly goes away. The adaptive response takes a long time to get going and a long time to sort of decline, but it never goes back to baseline. This red line here is above the blue line, and that's your memory response. So imagine if you were going to go buy a suit in a store. You could go to the store. There are a few samples there, a few different colors, a few different materials, and a few sizes. So you don't have too many choices, but it's available right away. However, it might not fit very well. Maybe the sleeves are too long, maybe the pants are too short, but you can get it right away, and it's going to be relatively inexpensive. You could also get a custom-made suit, custom fit exactly to your measurements. You have an infinite choice for color or material, and it's going to fit you extremely well. But it's going to take some time to make, and it's going to be a much bigger investment. So your innate immune system is the in-stock, what's available right now, works pretty well, and relatively small investment. And the adaptive immune response is custom fit, specifically to a pathogen, but it's going to take your body some time to make that, and it's a big investment for your body. Now, in normal mice or in people, if they have a normal immune system, they'll have a microorganism that they're infected with. It will start to grow up, the immune system will start to take care of it, and it will go away. If you're lacking adaptive immunity, the beginning control of the pathogen is not affected. But since without adaptive immunity, the pathogen will just stay consistent in your body because you can't eliminate it. However, without an innate immune response, very quickly the pathogen grows out of control. So remember, your innate immune system is at those barrier sites. If it's not there, not only is it not killing the pathogens that come in, it's not alerting the adaptive immune system that anything's wrong. So, today I'm just going to briefly touch on some of these topics, but this is what the entire semester is going to be based on. What are the players of the immune system? Where are they made? How do they develop? Where do they live once they develop? How long do they live? And then do they participate in the innate or the adaptive immune response? So, most of the immune response is based on your immune cells. They all start off as a stem cell in the bone marrow, and the main division occurs between lymphoid cells and myeloid cells. You also have your red blood cells here. They come from the same precursor, but they're not part of your immune response. Most of the myeloid cells are part of your innate response, and the B and the T cells are the main players in your adaptive immune response. And you can see once they leave the bone marrow, they can go to the blood, the lymph nodes, tissues, and then you also have things called effector cells, which you'll learn about in coming lectures. So what are the main principles of innate immunity? You have commensal organisms, as I mentioned, that cause very little damage, and the body needs to distinguish, the innate immune system needs to distinguish between those organisms that are still foreign to you but not dangerous and a foreign invader that is dangerous. Your barriers, your anatomical, physical barriers, protect you. And it's only if those are breached that the immune system has to step up and respond. The immune system will be activated quickly by things that induce inflammation. A lot of that is mediated by those soluble factors, those cytokines and chemokines. The myeloid lineage that I just showed you on the previous slide comprises most of the cells of your innate immune system. And those cells, because they're at those barrier sites, are also called sensor cells because they're the first to sense that there's a problem. And they express what's called pattern recognition receptors. And again, they're identifying broad classes of pathogens by patterns that look different among those different pathogens. Those sensor cells can also induce inflammation, and that's a way of recruiting help to the site. It's sort of sounding the alarm. And there are some innate lymphocytes, which you will learn about throughout the lectures. So, just keep in mind that, again, your commensal organisms you want to have around, but your immune system is designed to fight off things like viruses or intracellular bacteria, extracellular bacteria, fungi, and parasites. And those sensor cells that can detect patterns have different receptors on their surface to identify those different patterns. Now, I'm not going to go through what all these are now. You'll learn about those in the coming lectures. Also remember that these cells usually don't want to just deal with the infection by themselves. They want to recruit help. So they have an inflammatory response and secrete those chemical messengers to tell cells to come help. So the cells need to know where to go, but they also need to know what to do and also what cells should come there. So here's sort of a diagram of that. You have an immune cell here, and it's encountering some bacteria. It is producing those cytokines and chemokines. Now, this is in a tissue. Imagine that this is the skin, and you have your skin tissue here and an immune cell that's encountering a bacteria. It looks like it's eating that bacteria, but it's also making those cytokines and chemokines that are going to leave the tissue and go into the blood and signal to cells in the blood that, hey, there's a problem and we need your help. And so that's sort of what you see in the second panel, is the cells have received that signal, they've gotten the message, and they're going now to where the infection is. And they have different types of cells, and you'll learn about those different types of cells. And that's where the different cytokines become important, because different cytokines can recruit different types of cells. The innate immune response has several different ways of trying to deal with a pathogen because it matters what type of pathogen you're infected with. If something is an intracellular pathogen, you need to get at it inside cells. If it's extracellular, it's easier to get a hold of because it's outside of the cell. So it can kill the pathogens. It has different mechanisms for intra and extracellular pathogens, and it also depends where in the body the infection occurs. So mucosal sites have a different response, for instance, than the skin. So the immune response and the innate immune response knows where it is in the body, is able to determine what type of infection generally is occurring, and then is trying to tailor somewhat the response to what that type of pathogen is and where it is showing up in the body. So broadly, the anatomy of an immune response. First, a pathogen has to breach whatever that physical barrier is. Then the innate immune system responds, and eventually the adaptive immune system may respond. But sometimes the adaptive immune system is never needed. So if the innate immune system can deal with it quickly, and that can literally be within hours, you never get an adaptive immune response. Sometimes it requires recruitment of more innate cells to deal with the problem, and that can take a few days, but still there's no adaptive immune response yet. But if the initial innate cells at the site of infection and the recruited innate cells can't completely eliminate the infection, then the adaptive immune system will be recruited, and that will take days to weeks to occur. And that's demonstrated on this slide, where you can see the innate response starts within minutes, can go on for days, but then actually stops. And although the initial steps here are part of adaptive immunity, they're all orchestrated by the innate immune response, going and saying to the adaptive immune system, hey, there's a problem here. There's an infection. This is what I found at the infection site, and we need to make a stronger response. So the adaptive immune system is getting turned on within hours to days, but it's not actually functional until weeks after your infection, which is why when you get infected for the first time with a pathogen, you often get very sick and have to recover because your adaptive immune response won't get activated for weeks. Once it's activated, it can help to eliminate the pathogen, but by then you've been infected for a few weeks and you're probably quite sick. Eventually, the main goal of the adaptive immune system is not to fight off that primary infection. That's mostly the job of the innate immune system, but it's to generate memory. So if you see that pathogen again, your immune system is primed to respond quickly, and then you don't get sick the second time around.